what are the three most important things that you learn as a monk? So after so many years of being ordained as a monk.
I think the three most important things I learned as a monk. The first one is what is the real Dhamma, Sat Dhamma. After a long spiritual search and becoming a monk, I think that's one of the very important things I learned. A lot of ignorant people will say things like all religions are the same. So ignorant Buddhists also say Mahayana and Theravada are the same. So when I first renounced the home life, I went into the Mahayana tradition, and I thought there was Buddhism was all about Mahayana Buddhism. And luckily, I was disappointed with the teacher, my first teacher, whom I followed for 9 years, 3 years as a lay person, and 6 years as a lay person and 3 years as a renunciant. And after I left that teacher, I had so many questions, especially doubts about Mahayana Buddhism. So I went to Thailand in early 1986 and reordained as a Theravada monk. And my first vasa was spent in Wat Pa Nanachat with Ajahn Pasano, who is now the abbot of the Ajahn Chah Monastery in US. And that monastery, Wat Pa Nanachat, has a very good library. So when I studied the Theravada Suttas, I found a lot of contradictions between Mahayana and Theravada. And at that time, after my experience with my first teacher, I was not interested to look for another famous teacher. So I studied the suttas seriously, and I've continued to investigate the suttas up to the present. And now I've been a Theravada monk for 28 years. We know that the real Dhamma is what was existent during the Emperor Asoka's time, and the Asoka pillars that have been dug up verify that there were only 5 Nikayas, collections of the Buddha's discourses. So that is the real Dhamma. And the Khuddaka Nikaya was a minor collection. So now when we compare, we know that only 6 books of the Khuddaka Nikaya are reliable. So this is the real Dhamma of the Buddha. But knowing this is one thing, understanding the real Dhamma, the discourses of the Buddha is another thing, and you need practice, meditation combined with investigation of the Dhamma to really understand. So I have been doing that for 28 years. The second thing that I learned was as a monk was how to live the life of a monk like during the Buddha's time. After I renounced, I had lived 3 years in Mahayana monasteries in the US and in Penang. Then I went to Thailand, my first year as a Theravada monk. I lived in Thailand for 1 year, 1986. There I lived in cave monastery and forest monasteries. And after I came back to Malaysia in early 1987, mainly because of visa problem. And I realized from studying the suttas that the Buddha's disciples not only lived in forest monasteries, they also lived solitary lives. And I wanted to experience that. So after I came back from Thailand, I went to Ipoh, because Ipoh has a lot of caves. So I looked for a cave and I stayed and in a dark cave. But there were a lot of problems because people were not used to giving food to mendicant monk. monk who goes on alms round. And for the first 10 days, I had to eat only dumplings made of flour and sweetened. And it was only later that they learned that I was not a vegetarian, and they started giving me rice. And after a few months in Ipoh, I came to Penang and lived in this cave, Penang Hill. I spent my second Vasa here. And then in 1988, I went up to Balik Pulau. I lived in the hills in Balik Pulau. And then in 1989, I spent another year in Thailand. I lived in the cave in Ratchaburi, in Wat Pa Nanachat, and also in this forest area near the Myanmar border, which has now become a branch monastery called Dao Dam. And the abbot is Chansiri Panyo. And then in end of 1989, I came back to Penang and I found nobody using this cave. And no other monk wanted this cave, so I was very glad to come back to this cave. And I stayed until about 1997. So I spent about 7 years in this cave. And then I was invited to Kuala Lumpur, and I stayed 1 year in Kuala Lumpur, mainly because I wanted to get support to start a forest monastery. Having seen the difference between forest monasteries and town monasteries. And then 1998 we started our Vihara Buddha Gautama. So living this solitary life is something that was stressed by the Buddha. Seclusion was always stressed by the Buddha. It's a hard life, living alone in caves or in forests or in hilltops, because you'll be living with snakes and wild animals. And because where we stay, it's normally you don't have a door to hide behind, so thieves can always come in to steal your things. So you cannot have any belongings which are valuable. So it helps very much not to accumulate things. And you have no electricity, and you're staying alone. You have to learn to stay safe. You have to learn to stay healthy, because if you get sick, nobody is going to look after you. So the other thing is you go on daily alms round, and so it was a very Spartan type of living. You could call it ascetic life, but it was very spiritually satisfying. And you don't waste time on talking or work duties. And the best thing about staying alone is that it is ideal for attaining some samadhi. And samadhi is extremely important, because to understand the suttas, just by reading, you get a superficial knowledge. But if you have some samadhi, you get insights automatically. That's why when the Buddha looked for disciples, he looked for those with the jhanas, so that they could easily understand the discourse. So that you find like the Buddha went to look for 1,000 jatilas, and just one discourse they heard, they became enlightened. So there's a great difference between having samadhi and not having samadhi in understanding the suttas. And it was a very valuable experience to live alone, which I did for about 10 years. And the third thing I learned, important thing I learned as a monk, was how to use my knowledge and experience to benefit others. One was by teaching the Dhamma. From 1988, I started to write books and give Dhamma talks, and in English, Hokkien, and later in Cantonese. And I was trying to bring the Buddhists back to the original teachings of the Buddha. That's why the first book I wrote was called Return to the Original Teachings of the Buddha. Initially I got a very negative response, but over the years people have slowly begun to understand that the original teachings of the Buddha are in the suttas. So that is, I was quite glad over the years to see people having more and more interest in the suttas. And the other thing that I learned to use my knowledge and experience to benefit others was in founding this Vihara Buddha Gautama in 1998. Although the monastery now is 20 acres, which is small by Thai standards, it is one of the largest in Malaysia. And the good thing about it, it is teaching and practicing according to the original Dhamma. And my experience as an engineer in the Public Works Department was very useful in helping to build the monastery. So now after 15.5 years, all the construction is completed. Running a monastery is not easy. A lot of things we have to do alone. It was more a lot of plumbing jobs, electrical jobs, and a lot of maintenance jobs, construction and footpaths and all that. We had to do ourselves because initially the support was not there. But now that the monastery is completely built, hopefully it will benefit many generations in the right direction. So these are basically the three things, important things I learned as a monk. First is what is the real Dhamma of the Buddha. Secondly, how to live the life of a monk like the Buddha's disciples. And third, how to use my knowledge and experience to benefit others through the Dhamma talks, writing of books, and founding of the Vihara Buddha Gautama.